Hi everyone, welcome to another music theme Musing On. So as I mentioned in the 1991 album releases episode, I felt minded to do a separate episode about how I got into Slowdive. So here it is. So the album I'd spoken about in the 1991 episode was this, Just for a Day, and this is the first album I listened to by the band, but not in 1991. I think I made the point that it was one of those bands where in some ways I was completely blindsided. I may have even not specifically heard their name. We'll come on to a band that I did get into that were a shoegaze band at the time the album came out, but that'll be a little whiles into this video. But yes, so definitely late, very late to the party with this band. I believe I got into them sometime around, I would say, 2007 into 2008. Yeah, it was somewhere when I was blogging on Mog, the music blogging platform, back when it was a music blogging platform. So it was definitely after 2006, but I don't think it was the early days. And I know it was before before the middle of 2008, because that's when I made my first trip to Nova Scotia, and I was definitely listening to the band before then, because both myself and my then to be or soon to be wife were both listening to Slowdive stuff a lot, and in fact I think she probably got into Slowdive before I had. And in the process of, I suppose, like exploring the band and infilling, so I pretty much just infilled the CDs in quick succession in chronological order, and we'll come on to the individual albums in a moment. There's been a number of EPs as well, I think, as well, but I'm just talking about the albums in this episode. So yeah, so I pretty much bought them in chronological order. It was a good time as well, as I think I've mentioned on numerous occasions. It was a time when people were offloading their CD collections onto Amazon, and there was one, I think particularly I was doing a lot of trade with or buying a lot of stuff from some Amazon reseller in the States, and a lot of the times I could buy like 3 albums for £10, and the postage and packing on them I think was $1.50 or something. Yeah, so they were really like offloading their stuff, just making probably a marginal amount of money. But what I like about, but particularly Slowdive, all of their releases just take me away. It's almost like this feeling of being out of time. And if I ever want to listen to the music where I just get taken away from the everyday, this is the band I always turn to. There's something about the sound which just draws me away from everything. And I had a particularly awesome, I don't know what you'd call experience, I suppose, recently like that, where in preparation for the 1991 episode, I decided to listen through this album and then migrated on to the next 3, and then also their 5th album. As we're recording this, I've got the 4th album, and we'll see the order in a moment. Listen to it in the background, although the recording's not picking up what I'm playing on my computer, so you won't hear it. Because I don't want to get this video to taken down for a copyright strike. But there's a favourite trail really close to us. I think it's called the old Lawrencetown Trail. And I was walking through the first bit of it, and and there's a canopy of trees. So there's trees either side. It's like a mixed forest of evergreens and deciduous. But with the deciduous trees, they form a canopy, and it has that lovely effect where if you walk through there, different times of day, you get different lighting, because as the sun sort of moves out, it's coming in from the side mainly, because I think the path runs like north to south, or south to north, and then the sun's going like, across, if you like, in the sky. So when you walk down there at different times of the day, you get this, and it was just perfect time. It was quite early I say quite early in the morning. It's around sometime between 8 and 9, I think. And the sun was just coming through the canopy, and I'm listening to this album, Just for a Day. And it was just like, I was just sort of taken away. It was just this really lovely sensory experience. So that's why I like the band. So anytime I want to be just taken away, I just like a timeless feel. And what's interesting is I find with the bands, this band, I think there's only one track which reminds me specifically of around the time when I first listened to the album in, like I say, 2007, 2008. And that is off of this album, I think, and it's Catch the Breeze. But the others just, I've probably listened to them just so many times, and that's what's partially done it. So anyway, let's just go through, and I will muse a little bit about this band and talk about the sort of what I think. And again, this is retrospectively I'm doing this. So I wasn't thinking about this at the time, but as you know, I like to sort of retrace my musical steps and see how possibly I arrived at Slowdive and what bands I might have been listening to on the journey there. So, as I pointed out, I think when I got into them in 2007, 2008, they weren't in existence. They'd gone into sort of I can't even remember at that point whether technically they were still on hiatus or they had properly considered to be disbanded. But 95 to 2014, so 2007, 2008 is in that, was a period where they weren't really putting out any material, any new material as Slowdive. Interestingly, I haven't really listened to any spin-off stuff. Funnily enough, I should do that. I think I may have listened to, I think that's pronounced Mojave, maybe. Mojave 3. I think I might have listened to one album, possibly. So I probably need to go down that rabbit hole at some point. And then in 2014, they announced that they were reforming. And so I'll talk a little bit about their later albums as well, because everything obviously from 2014 onwards, when they reformed, I would have listened to primarily on Spotify. Because when I got into, actually that's another good yardstick, because when I got into them initially, that must have been before I got Spotify. So as I thought, it couldn't have been after, so I didn't have Spotify until around about 2008. So I was an early adopter, so that ties in with as well, knowing that I listened to them before I came to Nova Scotia for the first time, which was 2008. So they are pre-Spotify era listen for the first 3 albums, and then when they reformed, I was able to listen to their stuff on Spotify. So when were they formed? Years active, 89 to 1995, 2014 to present. So they were part of this shoegaze stroke, I think it was also called the scene that celebrates itself. And when I started listening to them finally in 2007, 2008, I did go down a bit of a post shoegaze rabbit hole, because I think I've mentioned the only other band, maybe I haven't mentioned it yet, maybe it was in the other episode, but the only other band I'd listened to properly when they came out, they were a shoegaze band, would be Lush, and we'll talk about them in a moment. So I was intrigued by the whole shoegaze thing in bands like Chapter House, but I remember not specifically buying anything at that point. I mean, I've subsequently listened to a number of bands. I've re-listened to, I think, Ride, who I was aware of, but hadn't really properly listened to them. So I listened to some Ride. Now, as it says here, there's some link to Susie and the Banshees, which we will talk about, actually. Track Slowdive. Also, the name Slowdive was inspired by a dream Chaplin experience and a conversation he had with Goswell, who mentioned Slowdive, the name of the single by one of her favourite bands, Susie and the Banshees. So, yep, in 1989, that's when they started, that's when they formed. And as I said, there was a number of EPs released by the band. And then Just for a Day came out in 91. I'll include links to all of this in the description. So, yeah, shoegaze. There's a, it says conflated with dream pop, and I do notice that the terms sometimes get used interchangeably. And we'll also talk a little bit at the end about where shoegaze is sort of gone, but it has quite a diverse stylistic origins, as you can see here, and it's gone in interesting directions as well, in addition to chill wave and new gaze. And of course there's a number of other bands like in the ambient area and post rock who probably cross over into shoegaze. So you can see here there's a list of the prominent shoegaze groups: Slowdive, Rush, Lush, Pale Saints, Swirlies, Chapter House, Swerve Driver. And then we've got, of course, 1991's Loveless by My Bloody Valentine, which I did own, I believe, before I got into Slowdive, but didn't listen to in 1991. I think I may have actually had this on cassette at some point. But I always found that My Bloody Valentine always sounded a lot more in your face, like a lot harder than Slowdive or other bands. So let's try and sort of trace a path through here. So, you could put bands like Slowdive, as it got stylistic origins, under, post-punk and even like space. There's bands which might be quite space rocky as well. So no doubt I've had a bit of an ear for Hawkwind, I suppose, although they're not up on this list. But I reckon the first band which had that slightly ethereal sound to them, certainly around the time of sort of 17 Seconds and Faith, would be The Cure. And the first time I heard The Cure was through the single A Forest, although I'm trying to think the main track off the first album, what would be the single for that? 10:15 Saturday Night, maybe? The one that I heard first. But it really wasn't until A Forest was the band's first entry in the top 40 of UK singles charts. And then sometime after that came out, some in the sort of, I suppose, early, would it be the early to mid 80s? I'm trying to think when I bought that. Yeah, probably sometime between 81 and 83, which is where I started buying their stuff. So where would we be? Was it the top? 84. So yeah, sometime around here, and then I infilled. But they were having such a big chart success in the UK, you couldn't really avoid them. But definitely these two had that sort of darker sound to them, I think, which definitely sort of bent my ear towards, or like a haunting ethereal sound. Now Slowdive's a little bit lighter, I find, but there was something about that sort of majesticness, and there was a slowness there as well. And then we have this album. So this is the album with the actual track Slowdive on it. 9th track. And this would have been, between Juju, which has got Spellbound on it and Arabian Nights, and Nocturne, which is the live double album, and that features Robert Smith. And A Kiss in the Dream House, if you look at the personnel on here, is still John McGeoch. So John McGeoch was still in the band at this point, and then when they came to record a live album, Robert Smith was standing in, and he did actually end up, was it Hyena, where the album he played on? Yeah. So Robert Smith does actually play on Hyena. And there's an interesting story in the Cure book I've got. Sort of the history of early Cure, which sort of talks about that period when he was when he played in Susie and Banshees, because he played in the band a couple of times live, and then finally sort of joined them for this studio album, because he stood in, I believe, when they were first on tour, when the Cure were first supporting Susan the Banshees, and the original guitarist and drummer had left before John McGeoch and Budgie had joined. So I was definitely into Susan the Banshees. Again, another artist that had a big, number of singles in the UK. But I was trying to think, like, what was my first Susan the Banshees album I actually bought on cassette? And I can't remember if it was either Juju or the first album. And both of these I bought a little time after they came out. But before I finally got to see them live when Tinderbox came out, which is 86, but I was already listening to them before then. But this was the album that I bought when it came out. In fact, I was so desperate to hear something new by them, I bought Cities in Dust, which had come out the previous year, in actual fact. So yeah, I was trying to even remember if I saw them play live before the hour between then. I know it was at the Brighton Centre, and I do know that it was a period when I think Susie Sue had injured her. I don't know if she'd injured her knee or her ankle, because she was sitting on like a stool at the time and had like a walking cane when she played live. She didn't stand up that much when she played live for that particular gig. And at that point, who was the guitarist that took over? Yeah, John Valentine Carruthers. So he'd taken over from Robert Smith, who had taken over from John McGeoch, one of my favourite guitarists. And yeah, so this album sort of placed into that interesting sort of post-punk slot, psychedelia. And I was trying to remember, because for me, I think I find that, is it Kaleidoscope to be also pretty yeah, this one here, which is a little bit earlier, was an interesting experimental album by the band. So these three albums where John McGeoch was in the band, not surprisingly, so Kaleidoscope, Juju, and A Kiss in the Dream House, so the three albums that he played on. Yeah, real interesting to listen in chronological order. But this is where the track Slowdive is situated. But yeah, it's a great album here. What does it say much? Does it say much about critical? Unanimously praise for the album on its release. Considered it innovative, yeah. Yeah, so definitely check out the band sheets. Now, sometime, was it 80? Yeah, 85, this band appeared, Jesus and the Mary Chain. I remember them at that point I was still buying sounds. I just started, so Christmas 84, I started going back to seeing live gigs again, and I went to see Big Country in Brighton with the Cult supporting. So that would be around the time of Steel Town era. So Steel Town era, Big Country, and Resurrection Joe-ish period, the Cult. And I was listening to a lot of sort of interesting alternative bands at that time. Sisters of Mercy was one. It was quite good because in 85, I think, Killing Joke, Nighttime came out. And I'd already been listening to Killing Joke. So there was a lot of indie I was listening to in 85. And this album came out, and I did buy it at the time, but I didn't listen to them that much. I didn't listen to this album that much. But it had a very, shoegaze, pre-shoegaze sound to it. The guitar sound was quite sort of blurry. And they had a pretty distorted sound, I seem to remember. But again, they were quite sort of heavy. Yeah, it says bubblegum pop drowned in feedback. Melody with obnoxious bursts of white noise. Which is an interesting way of thinking about it. And we've got tracks like Just Like Honey. So yeah, you can see it's pretty high ratings. But it was, yeah, the British press, particularly Sounds magazine, were raving about the band. But I never got to see them live. Interesting. Pop Matters, 12 Essential 1980s Alternative Rock Albums. I should check that out. See what's on there. So again, sometime on the path, I discover the Pixies. I think it was around about the time this album came out. I have problems remembering the first time I listened to the Pixies. I know I was definitely listening to them as by the time Trompe le Monde came out, because I remember buying it when it came out. So yeah, sometime before 91 I started listening to the Pixies. And although they're not really a shoegaze band, there's some aspects of their sort of quiet, loud dynamic that I think, again, got me interested in different types of like dynamic interplay in a band. And I was lucky enough to actually see them live in Halifax in the 2010s, where I believe they played Doolittle in its entirety. I think that's right, amongst other things. So yeah. So, On the Pathway. First out and out shoegaze album I listened to when it came out was this one, Spooky, 1992. So 1992 would still been, basically working in the same job I was talking about in the 91 episode. So I didn't leave there till 93. So played this a lot in the car. Funnily enough, didn't buy anything else, I don't think. See, I have this half memory of having another Lush cassette kicking around in the car, but I just cannot remember what other one it was. But it was this one that I played all the time. Yeah. And I thoroughly recommend checking this album out. So yeah, that was my nice sort of real-time step on point with shoegaze. Produced by Robin Guthrie by the Cocteau Twins. And the Cocteau Twins is another band you can sort of put into the mix in terms of the sort of dream pop elements. But I wanted to be honest for this. And I must admit, never really buying anything by the Cocteau Twins. I used to listen to John Peel shows, so I was aware of their stuff. But I'm pretty sure I never owned any albums by the band. And everything I've listened to by them has been as a result of Spotify. So. Yeah. For Love's a wonderful track. So then we get into the Slowdive. So yeah, sometime 2007, 2008, I pick up Just for a Day, Souvlaki, and then Pygmalion. And the cool thing about these albums is an interesting like musical journey you can go on. So over the course of these albums, the band were getting more ethereal, might be a good word here. So still you could put them in this sort of shoegaze stroke, dream pop, somewhat interchangeable terms, definitely very dreamy. Like I said, that's probably the quality that I feel gives them that, timeless, or that just shifting out of time feel. But over the course of these albums, you can definitely hear that, more ethereal sound, more, I don't know if space is the right word, but definitely that. And it also, there were elements that were starting to sound a bit more stripped down. So it's interesting they make about dub music and drum and bass. And they did do some recording with Brian Eno. Interesting enough. So he's on keyboard and treatments. Ultimately, they handled the production alongside a number of different engineers and mixing people, as you can see here. So the previous album, what was that? Who's the production there? Neil Halstead. Yeah, so he did his own production. Interesting. And we get on to Pygmalion, which is, out of those three, is the most ambient sounding. And also I seem to remember, if you track down the extended versions of these albums on Spotify, I think it might be this one, has got really, really sort of ambient sounding alternate versions. These sort of bonus disc, these Pygmalion demos. And I remember a couple of years ago, just one afternoon, was putting the version that's on Spotify, because as I mentioned, I have the first three albums on CD, but I remember putting the first album on Spotify. It was probably one, I don't know if it was a Sunday afternoon, I think it was one morning actually, and just sort of drifting off completely for like several hours, and I just lost 2 hours of time, and I was in that weird, what would you call it, like, I wasn't sure if I was asleep or awake, like lucid dreaming to Pygmalion. Was pretty surreal and wonderfully surreal experience. So this is the most ambient, and it's probably the one that features the most amount of electronica in it. Quite sparse. Now, I don't know at the time how it was. Yeah, so it says it's largely overlooked by contemporary music critics. Probably they didn't understand it. And at this time we had Britpop coming in. You could say Britpop was seen by a lot, I think, as a bit of an antithesis to shoegaze, and certainly there's been some disparaging things, I think, said by Britpop band members about shoegaze generally. Yeah, so I don't think it fared very well. Then in 2017 we get this album comes out. So I actually didn't bother buying it when it came out, simply because by then I'm using Spotify. So I listened to it. I'm listening to it now on headphones actually while I'm recording this. Probably why I feel incredibly laid back at the moment. And yeah, wonderful album. Yeah, good. Not that they ever lost their form, but a good return. A good return. So shoegaze, dream pop. So more in style like the first two albums than the third album, definitely. It sounded like they'd sort of really nailed that sound. Right, it's a hybrid of the first and second albums. And what was interesting, and I don't know why I didn't buy it, but around this time I was doing an interesting purchasing project, where I decided that, and part of it was genuinely to support local record stores. I decided that I wanted to go back to buying vinyl, which I hadn't bought for probably a number of years, and create this little collection of one album for each year that I've been alive. And then it went back a little bit further, so now it goes back even further to, I think, the first record that's considered to be an album in that 1001 albums to listen to before you die. So now it goes back way back to the 50s forward. And it sort of started off, the project sort of started off where I'd heard the first Little Richard out, or hang on, was it the first one? It was a Little Richard album, and it's got a lot of the early classics on it. And I thought I'd really fancy buying that on vinyl, so I did. And then with that one, I thought, yeah, I should do a little vinyl buying project to support local record stores. And started doing that and just going through, and it was really interesting. So it had to be something that was available at the local record store. I think in one instance, or I did actually get them to order something. I really wanted the first Black Sabbath album, which I don't own on vinyl, and I really wanted that in the collection. But everything else, it was interesting. It had, I just bought stuff that was readily available in the store from that year, and obviously I had to like the album. And it's ended up as a really interesting collection, which I'll have to go through. It's all over the map, musically. There's some super heavy stuff in there. There's some super ambient stuff. There's all sorts of stuff in between. There's was it last year or the years before? I think probably last year's Pink Pantheress album. I haven't decided what to buy for 2024 yet. I normally wait until the end of the year and a little bit into the following year till I decide, and I make a trip over to one of the record stores. In fact, there's several record stores all owned by the same people. It's Taz Records. Just a shout out to Taz Records. So there's one in Halifax, one in Dartmouth, it's a smaller one in Dartmouth, and then one over in Bedford, and we like to go to the Bedford one actually. So yeah, I'm going to look forward to taking the customary trip either at the end of the year or in the new year to pick up the next vinyl choice. I haven't made my decision yet. I think the previous year to that, was it 2022, from the most recent one I bought was those EPs that were collected together as a 2-album disc, which was Johnny Marr's stuff from 2022. So that it's constantly being added to every year. But yeah, so when I think of this album, because I remember I happened to be in one of the local record stores, and the person in there said, "Oh, have you heard the new Slowdive album yet?" And I said, "Oh yeah, I had heard it on Spotify, but I think I'd already chosen my pick for 2017, funnily enough, because I can't remember what it is now because it's upstairs in the main room. But yeah, so that's what that makes me think of. And then we got onto this 2023. See, this is rather annoying that I didn't buy it. I can't remember why. Maybe it wasn't so readily available at the record store. Or maybe I'd already committed myself to buy the Pink Pantheress album. But yeah, this is a lovely album. And I listened to this again recently, and this really does make me fall into like a timeless state. Yeah, beautiful album. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know if I ever get the chance to see them live. I wouldn't mind seeing them actually. No. I don't know how close the if we look at the personnel, I'm just looking to see how much the lineup's changed over the. I do know that the vast majority of the band is still, yeah. So it's really only the drummer. That's I mean, that's why I say the original, like 1991 they were there from. So yeah. I'm sorry, yeah. Simon Scott. When did he? Because isn't there some? Did he? Yeah. So he left in. Oh, that's right. Yeah, he left in '94, didn't he? Someone else came in for a period of time. No, I get it. So yeah. So I'm now got into real slow time because there's a track come on now in my headphones. Falling Ashes. Oh, the closing track on Slowdive by Slowdive. Well, that's good timing. Very good timing. Okay, so yeah, I mean, it would be very tempting, and I've been trying to avoid doing this, but you know, thinking about it is very tempting. I always look for bands now which form a nice little vinyl collection, and this would be a great candidate. I don't know how easy these are now, to how much they've been reissued. I mean, these two probably pretty easy to get on vinyl, relatively speaking. I know I own these on CD already, but yeah, it's a nice little vinyl collection there. I think, yeah, 5 albums is a nice amount for little mini collections of bands. So then, sort of between, I suppose, between me listening to the first 3 albums retrospectively, and then listening to the Slowdive album in 2017, I went off down a bit of a side channel, I suppose. So I made aware of Black Gaze, as it's called now. I don't know if it was called that when it was first sort of came together, through Alcest. So listening to early Alcest. But again, there's an interesting sort of side channeling. So I've almost got like two causal crossroads, where I've got 2 causal links crossing here, because at some point in, again, 2000, yeah, probably 2007, 2008, I was listening to this album, Bergtap by Olva, atmospheric black metal album, folk metal. So I probably, my ear was getting bent a little bit, and also prior or round about the same time, I was well, both of these will be retrospectively, wouldn't they? Yeah, 95 and 97. I was listening to this album by the band Summoning as well, another atmospheric black metal band. So I think those two contributed. And then whilst I was sort of me doing, so I was doing music blogging on Mog, and then I went over to having my own blogging website for a while where I blogged about music after sort of Mog started to wrap up. So it was about 2009 into 2010 by then, but I'd listened to this album before. And so this reminds me of that period when I'd sort of effectively switched blogging platforms. And so I was sort of checking out these. And of course, as we get into this period, we're into the area of streaming all through this. So yeah, I'm sort of checking out Alcest all the way through until we get the Slowdive album coming out. So I sort of went off this, side quest sort of thing into black gaze, which is influenced by shoegaze. So it's sort of, you could argue it's a sort of bringing together atmospheric black metal and shoegaze. And then inevitably, I ended up in 2013 or roundabouts then listening to Sunbather. And funnily enough, I actually do own this on vinyl. This was my 2018 album that I bought on vinyl for my sort of vinyl collection, yeah. Ordinary Corrupt Human Love. So yeah, interesting group of bands there to listen to, I think. So you've got, and again, some of you may have already listened to these bands, but The Cure, Susan the Banshees, this band, Jesus Mary Chain, good old Pixies, Lush, then Slowdive, into things like the Alvarez. This band have gone off on an interesting side quest. If you look at, because I was listening to them, so interestingly, I say interestingly and so a lot, don't I? My Step On band album, it was actually this in 1998. So sometime 98, 99. This is I listened to, and then I went back in time and listened to their earlier stuff. So I start here, go back, and then go off sort of thing. So yeah. But one thing I should do is properly listen to a lot of the other shoegaze bands again, because I know I've listened to Ride and a little bit of Swerve Driver, but not much else. So I think I will end it there, as now the playing of that Slowdive album is definitely finished and it's gone into autoplay, and I'm now listening to a band called Acid Ghost and a track called Sandy Kim, who I've never heard before. Thanks once again for watching and listening. I will catch you in a future episode. Bye for now.